Their whole defense is that this was a shmoo-shmide pact gone wrong. He didn't have time to do it before he then passed out. This shitstorm happened. He did this to himself, but he just didn't get the chance to do it before Emily did it, so he shouldn't be held responsible for her death, as he didn't want to live without her, so why the fuck would he kill her? She was slightly withdrawn and out of sorts. Isn't that fairly normal for 99% of women at least once a month? Hello, and welcome back to my little corner of YouTube. So, I said in my last video that I got a new microphone set up, and I've never had a microphone before. I'm used to yelling into the camera. Anyways, so our air conditioning went out, and it's hot as hell in my room. Hopefully the fans aren't as bad as they were when I filmed yesterday. And send me good energy. Send my microphone good energy. Let's see. Let me just do my intro. Let's start there. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of our book club series. If you're new here and you don't know who I am, my name is Brooke. I have different types of content on my channel. What you are watching right now is a continuation of our book club series. We read chapters of the book together, and then we discuss the characters and the drama and our theories and opinions about what we think might happen. Right now, we are reading The Pact by Jodi Picoult. If you want to catch up to where we're at right now in the book and the discussion, there is a playlist on my channel called Book Club The Pact. I will link that. I think it's up here. I will link that playlist up here somewhere for you to find that if you would like to catch up to where we're at right now, or if you just want to watch the last few videos leading up to this one and catch up that way. However you choose to catch up, we would love to have you join in with us. I always do a quick recap of the last few sentences that we read in the last video, just so that everybody's up to speed and we all know what's going on. Other than that, today is reading number 26, and I'm going to go ahead and get started. Also, I did my nails. They're not perfect. It looks a little goofy, but I don't really give a shit because it's not like I ever go anywhere, so who fucking cares? But yeah, so I did my nails last night and I put a few of them on upside down. Shit happens. It's October 27th right now. I don't know what time or day it is when you're watching this, but happy Halloween! I really wanted to have some Halloween decorations. Like, I really wanted to, but I don't have anything. Yesterday, last video, we got to go back in time to when Emily was still alive, and her and Chris are about to, well, they're on their way to the carousel where they have this shmoo-shmide pact that they're going to off themselves together. They're getting ready and they drive to the carousel where Chris works. not the bar, not that carousel. This is a carousel like a kid's ride where Chris works during the summertime. Anyways, and so that's where they decide they're going to go and do the deed. They make love and they ride the carousel, and then that's pretty much where it ended. Chris and Emily are hugging, and then the scene ended. And then now we're moving on to another section. So we're back to now when Emily's gone, Emily's dead, Chris is in jail, the trial's going on, all that good stuff. If you've been following along, then you already know, but just for those that are catching up, that's where we're at. Randy Underwood apologized to the jury. I work nights, she explained, but they didn't want to keep all of you up during the time I'm usually most lucid. She'd just come off a 36-hour stint at the hospital where she was a physician's assistant in the emergency room. Just let me know if I don't make any sense, she joked. And if I try to intubate someone with a pen, slap me. So it looks like we're back at the trial, and Randy Underwood is, I don't know who she is. I have no idea who the fuck that is. But anyways, so this is the next witness. Sounds like she's a nurse. She's a physician's assistant in the emergency room. So she just got off work. She's tired, delusional, and she's about to go on the stand. And she says, and if I try to intubate someone with a pen, slap me. All right, so we're back at the trial. Jordan smiled. We certainly appreciate you being here, Miss Underwood. Hey, the witness grinned. What's a little sleep? She was a large woman, still dressed in hospital scrubs that had small green snowflakes printed all over them. Jordan had already established her identity for the record. Miss Underwood, he continued, were you on duty the night of November 7th, when Emily Gold was brought into the emergency room of Bainbridge Memorial? Yes, I was. Do you remember her? I do. She was very young, and those are always the most terrible to see. There was a lot of activity around her at first. She was arresting as the medics brought her in, but apparently that was over in a matter of seconds, and she was pronounced dead by the time she was in the ER cubicle. I see. What happened next? Well, standard procedure is to have someone identify the body before it's moved to the morgue. We had been told that the parents were on their way, so I started to clean her up. Well, standard procedure is to have someone identify the body before it's moved to the morgue. We had been told that the parents were on their way, so I started to clean her up. Clean her up? It's customary, she said, especially when there's a great deal of blood. It's harder on the relatives to see that. Basically, I wiped off her hands and her face. Nobody told us not to wash her. What do you mean? It's customary, especially when there's a great deal of blood. It's harder on the relatives to see that. Basically, I wiped off her hands and her face. Nobody told us not to wash her. What do you mean? In police investigations, evidence is evidence, and a corpse qualifies. But the officers who brought her in said it was a Schwierigkeit. No one from the police told us to treat it differently. No one came in to do tests or anything. You specifically washed her hands? Yes. I remember that she had on a pretty gold ring, one of those Celtic knots, you know? And when did you leave the cubicle? When the girl's father came in to ID the body, she said. Jordan smiled at the witness. Thank you, he said. Nothing further. As Jordan had expected, Barry Delaney declined to cross-examine the physician's assistant. There was very little she could ask without making her star witness, Detective Marone, look like a bumbling fool. So Jordan put Dr. Linwood Carpagian on the stand, thinking as he watched the man that he owed Selena a dozen roses for finding him. The jury could not take their eyes off him. Dr. Carpagian looked like Cary Grant in his prime, with silvered hair waving off his temples and finely manicured hands that looked capable of holding your confidence, much less anything more conventionally substantial. He sat easily on the stand, accustomed to being the center of attention. Your Honor, Barry said, request permission to approach. Puckett waved the lawyers closer, and Jordan raised his brow, waiting to hear what Barry had to say. For the appellate record, we still have an objection to this witness. Miss Delaney, Judge Puckett said, I already ruled on this in your pre-trial motion. As Barry stomped back to her table, Jordan walked Dr. Carpagian through his credentials, further impressing the jury. Doctor, he said, how many teens have you worked with? Thousands, Dr. Carpagian said. I couldn't begin to narrow that down. And how many with suicidal natures? Oh, I've counseled upwards of 400 teenagers who were suicidal. And that, of course, doesn't count the profiles of other suicidal teens who were featured in the 3 books I've written on the subject. So you've published your findings? Yes. Beside the books, I've had studies published in the Journal of Counseling. Yes. Beside the books, I've had studies published in the Journal of Counseling and Clinical Psychology and the Journal of Abnormal Child Psychiatry. Since we're not nearly as familiar as you are with the phenomenon of teen suicide, Could you just give us a general overview of its characteristics? Certainly. Teen suicide is an alarming epidemic, increasing every year. To an adolescent, suicide is seen as a joint statement of strength and despair. Teenagers need, more than anything, to be taken seriously, and the world of a teenager revolves around himself. Now, imagine a troubled teenager with a problem. His parents brush him off because they either don't want to accept that their child is upset or don't have time to listen. And in response, their teenager thinks, "Oh yeah? Well, watch what I can do." And he kills himself. He's not thinking of being dead. He's thinking of suicide as a way to solve the problem, to end the pain, and to say, "So there, all at once." And to say, "So there, all at once." Is there a percentage breakdown for male versus female suicides? Girls try to kill themselves 3 times more frequently than boys, but boys succeed far more often. Really? Jordan feigned amazement. In reality, he and Dr. Karpagian had fine-tuned this testimony for hours the previous week, and there was nothing the good doctor could say that was going to surprise him. Why is that? Well, when girls try to commit suicide, they often use less decisive methods, pills or carbon monoxide poisoning, both of which require a long period of time to do their work, during which the victim is often found alive and taken to the hospital. Sometimes they slash their wrists, but most draw the razor across laterally. On the other hand, he said, boys tend to use guns or to hang themselves. Both methods are fast, death occurring before someone can save them or stop them. I see, Jordan said. Is there a certain type of teenager that is more likely than another to kill him or herself? That's the intriguing thing, Dr. Karpagian said, his eyes snapping with the interest of a scholar. A poor teenager is just as likely to try as a wealthy one. There is no real socioeconomic profile to suicidal teens. Are there any behaviors that just jump out and say, "Whoa, this kid's about to kill himself"? Depression, Karpagian said bluntly. It may be something that has been going on for years. It may happen rather quickly in a matter of several months. The actual suicide is often triggered by a certain event, which, coupled with depression, seems too overwhelming to accept. Would this depression be obvious to people who knew the teenager? Well, you know, Mr. McAfee, that's one of the problems. Depression can manifest itself in many different ways. It's not always noticeable to friends and family. There are certain signs of suicidal behavior that psychologists recognize and that should be taken seriously if they occur. But some teens show none of them, and some show all of them. What are these signs, doctor? Sometimes we see a preoccupation with death, or a change in eating or sleeping habits, rebellious behavior, withdrawal from people, or outright running away. Some suicidal teens act persistently bored or have difficulty concentrating. There may be evidence of drug or alcohol abuse, falling grades. They may neglect their appearance, exhibit personality changes, or have psychosomatic complaints. Sometimes we see kids giving away prized possessions or joking about killing themselves. But, as I said, sometimes we don't see any of this. Sounds like some perfectly normal teens I know, Jordan said. Exactly, the psychologist said. That's what makes it so hard to diagnose beforehand. Jordan lifted a document, a collection of Emily Gold's medical information and interviews with neighbors, friends, and family by both Selena and the police. Doctor, did you have a chance to look at Emily Gold's profile? I did. And what did her friends and family say about her? For the most part, her parents were unaware of any depression. Likewise, her friends. Her art teacher's comments suggested that although Emily wasn't talking about being upset, her artwork had taken a turn toward the macabre. It seems to me, reading between the lines, that Emily was withdrawing in the weeks before her death. She was spending quite a lot of time with Chris, which is also consistent with a suicide pact. A suicide pact? What does that mean exactly? 2 or more deaths planned together. It's an extraordinary thought to an adult. Actually, the idea of holding enough to sway over someone to get them to take their life too. He smiled sadly at the jury. Most of you have forgotten, probably for good reason, what it was like when you were 16 and 17, how crucially important it was to have someone understand you and admire you. You grow up and things get more relative. But when you're an adolescent, that one close relationship is all-consuming. You are so bonded to that peer that you wear the same kinds of clothes, you listen to the same kinds of music, you do the same kinds of things for fun, and you think alike. It only takes one teenager to conjure up the idea of suicide. It takes a variety of psychological reasons for a second teen to decide it's a good idea. Dr. Karpasian looked at Chris, as if analyzing him now. Teens who decide to commit suicide together are usually close, but once the decision to kill themselves is made, that small world grows even smaller. The only people they want to confide in is each other. The only people they want to see is each other. And everything narrows until the only thing that matters is the act of committing suicide. The planning, the event itself. They're going to make a collective statement to all the people who are on the outside of that very small world, the people who don't understand them. Dr. Karpasian, based on Emily's profile, did she seem suicidal? Not having met her, the best I can say is that it is entirely possible she was depressed enough to commit suicide. Jordan nodded. You are saying there doesn't have to be a blatant red flag on that profile? That a girl who looks like a pretty normal teen, but is just a little bit withdrawn, might be suicidal? It's happened before, Dr. Karpasian said. I see. He turned toward his notes. Did you have a chance to look at the profile of Chris? It had been at Jordan's insistence that Selena created a profile, in much the same way one had been constructed for Emily, by talking to family and friends and eliciting comments. Knowing, albeit grudgingly, that Chris had never been suicidal, it wouldn't work to get him face-to-face with an expert, and then put that expert on the stand, sworn to tell the truth. I did look it over, and the most important thing I saw in Chris Hart's profile was his preoccupation with Emily Gold. I was a psychologist long before I was an expert on suicide, you know, and there's a specific term for the kind of relationship that had developed between Chris and Emily over the years. What's that? Fusion, he smiled at the jury. Just like physicists, it means that two personalities have bonded together so strongly that a whole new personality is created, and the separate ones cease to exist. Jordan raised his eyebrows. Could you run that by me again? Bro, that's fucking crazy. Let's pause here and discuss. I did look it over, and the most important thing I saw in Chris Hart's profile was his preoccupation with Emily Gold. Just like physicists, it means that the two personalities have bonded together so strongly that a whole new personality is created, and separate ones cease to exist. Now, that is some crazy shit. I'm genuinely curious now. Wow. Bruh. Okay. Oh, sorry. I'll keep going now. Jordan raised his eyebrows. Could you run that by me again? Yeah, I'm with you, Jordan. Holy shit. In plain English, Dr. Karpasian said, it means that Chris and Emily's minds and personalities were so connected, there really was no distinction. Their minds and personalities were so connected, there really was no distinction between them. Holy shit, that's insane. That's insane. No wonder she didn't want to have sex with him. Like, would you want to have sex with yourself all the time? Well. Anyways. So if this is true, then that would mean that they have, like, the same thoughts and the same ideas. So, I don't know. That's just weird. Alright, anyways. Sorry. They grew up, let's see, what was that last sentence? There really was no distinction between them. They grew up so close that they couldn't function without each other. Anything that happened to one of those kids was going to affect the other. God, that's crazy. And in the case of the death of one of them, the other one literally would not be able to go on living. This is a good defense. I see where they're going with this. But I wonder if that's true, though. Like, what? They grew up so close that they couldn't function without each other. I wonder if that's how twins are. Because you know how people say, like, twins have a special connection? Is that true? What's your experience with that? Like, what does that look like? What do people mean when they say twins have a special connection? Is that like you know what the other one is thinking? Like, you can communicate without words? Like, what does that mean when people say that? Let me know in the comments, because I'm curious. All right. So Jordan's like, run that by me again. He does his little explanation. Literally would not be able to go on living. And he looked at Jordan. Does that make more sense? It's more clear, Jordan said, but it's hard to accept. Dr. Karpasian smiled. Congratulations, Mr. McAfee. That simply means you are mentally healthy. Jordan grinned. Don't know that Miss Delaney would agree, sir, but I thank you. That's funny. The jury tittered behind him. They tittered behind him. So in your expert opinion, Dr. Karpasian, did you come to any conclusions about Chris Hart and Emily Gold? Yes. I see Emily as being the one who was suicidal for whatever reason. And it's important to note this. We may never know what that reason was, but something made her depressed, and death seemed a way out. She turned to Chris because he was the person closest to her by far, and she told him she was going to commit suicide. But once she confided in Chris, he realized that if Emily was dead, there would be no reason for him to be alive. Jordan stared at the jury. So what you're saying is that whatever made Emily suicidal was not the same thing that made Chris suicidal. No. It was most likely the simple fact that Emily was going to kill herself that made Chris agree to a suicide pact. Jordan closed his eyes briefly. To him, that was the biggest hurdle in his defense. Getting the jury even to believe that two kids could have come up with this awful idea together. The good doctor, thank God, or Selena, who'd found him, had made it seem possible. One more thing, Jordan said. Emily purchased a very expensive gift for someone several months before her suicide. What would you say about that kind of behavior? Oh, that would be a giveaway, Dr. Karpasian said. Something she was planning to leave behind for someone, to make sure she was remembered. So Emily bought this gift to let the world know she was planning on killing herself? Objection, Barry called. Leading. Your Honor, this is very important, Jordan countered. Then rephrase, Mr. McAfee. Jordan turned back to Dr. Karpasian. In your expert opinion, why would Emily purchase an expensive gift like that watch if she was indeed? I'd say, the psychologist mused, that Emily bought the watch before she decided to kill herself and involve Chris in a suicide pact. And it may indeed have been more expensive, but that didn't matter. He smiled sadly at the attorney. When you're going to kill yourself, the last thing on your mind is getting a refund. Thank you, Jordan said, and sat down. Barry's head was spinning. She had to make an expert look like an idiot, and she had absolutely no grounding in his field. Okay, doctor, she said gamely. You looked at Emily's profile, and you mentioned a lot of characteristics that teenagers sometimes exhibit when they are suicidal. She picked up her legal pad covered with notes. Sleeplessness is one. Yes. And did you see that in Emily's profile? No. Did you find unexplained changes in eating behavior in the profile? No. Did Emily act rebellious? Not that I could see, no. How about running away? No. Was she preoccupied with death? Not overtly. Did she appear to be bored or have difficulty concentrating? No. Was she abusing alcohol or drugs? No. Was she failing any classes? No. Was she neglecting her appearance? No. Was she complaining of psychosomatic illnesses? No. Did she joke about it? Apparently not. So, the only characteristics that led you to believe Emily might have been suicidal were that she was slightly withdrawn and out of sorts. She was slightly withdrawn and out of sorts. Isn't that fairly normal for 99% of women at least once a month? So, Barry, the prosecution, is now cross-examining this doctor. And ain't that the fucking truth? Withdrawn and out of sorts once a month. Shit. Here's the thing. It's not even once a month, y'all. It's like half the fucking month. Okay? Shit. Alright. Dr. Carpathian smiled. I have it on authority that that's true, he said. So, isn't it possible that since Emily didn't exhibit most of these traits, she was not suicidal? It is possible, the psychologist said. The few signs Emily did exhibit, would you say they are normal behavior for a teenager? Yes, often. All right. Now, you worked from a profile of Emily, is that correct? Yes. Who made up this profile? I understand the defense's investigator, Miss Damascus, collated it. They were a series of interviews done by herself or by the state with friends and families of the teenager in question. By your own testimony, Chris Hart was the closest person to Emily Gold. Were his observations part of her profile? Well, no, he wasn't asked. But he was the one Emily turned to the most during those last weeks? Yes. So he may have been able to tell you whether or not she had any of those characteristics we just listed. He probably would have seen more than anyone else. Yes. Yet you didn't speak to him when he was obviously your best source. We were trying to make a judgment without Chris's input to keep it completely unbiased. That wasn't the question, Doctor. The question was, did you interview Chris Hart? No, I did not. You did not interview Chris Hart. He was alive and available, and yet you never even consulted, even though he was the best witness you had on Emily's behavior prior to her death. Short of Emily herself, that is. Barry pinned the witness with her gaze. And you couldn't interview Emily, could you? So she's going in on this doctor. This profile of Emily and Chris, there's one of each of them. And it's being used to analyze the behaviors in this case. Chris's attorney, so the attorney for the defense, Jordan, his assistant is Miss Damascus. And she's the one who built this profile of Emily and of Chris. I see. So would it make sense then, and I think that we could say that it would it make sense then that she could possibly curate this profile of Emily to make Chris look more innocent? Because I guess she's the one who went and did all these interviews with all these people that knew Emily and whatnot, and that's how she put this profile of Emily together. I'm going to end today's reading there. I'm trying to think if there's anything else to really talk about. Basically, these profiles of Chris and Emily have been built to investigate and to help analyze what the fuck went down, right? And so the profile of Emily and the profile of Chris were both built by Miss Damascus, who is Jordan's assistant, Selena Damascus. She interviewed all these people that knew Emily and knew Chris individually and did all this shit in order to build these profiles. The issue with this is she works for the defense. So of course she's going to curate a profile for Emily that would make Chris look more innocent. Duh. So I don't know where they're going to go with that. I don't know how that's going to work into all this shit. Because you would think if they were going to build a profile, they would want it to be unbiased. So why? I don't know. I guess maybe she's the only one that put the work in, I guess. Who the fuck knows? I guess if you're the one that puts the work in, You can curate it how you want. Let's see what else happened real quick that we need to maybe discuss. So Barry's like, gotcha, bitches. A nothing but net 3-pointer. And you couldn't interview Emily, could you? So Barry over here is grilling this doctor, basically trying to make the point that Emily was not exhibiting any signs of. Emily was in no way showing these signs. And the only thing that you have proven to us or told us is that she may have been PMSing. So Barry's over here trying to present her case and say that Emily did not want to do this to herself and that she may have just been having premenstrual syndrome. So let's go back to the beginning of this reading and discuss what happened. They bring in this ER physician's assistant that was at the ER the night that Emily was brought in to the hospital, the night that she died. Instead of leaving Emily bloody and gross, this ER doctor takes it upon herself to clean Emily up before her parents come in to identify her, to make it easier on the parents. Says like it's customary, especially when there's a great deal of blood, it's harder on the relatives to see that. Instead of waiting there to be an investigation done and make sure that this was a schmooishmide, so they're not able to even prove really much of anything, whether Emily did this to herself or whether Chris did this to her, because the evidence has already been messed with at this point. But the officers who brought her in said it was a schmooishmide. No one from the police told us to treat it differently. No one came in to do tests or anything. Here, this ER nurse was told that it was a schmooishmide, and so she just assumes there's not going to be an investigation. We don't need the evidence. So she cleans her up. And Jordan's like, you specifically washed her hands? Jordan's pointing out, I think, my opinion, y'all can let me know what you think in the comments below. They took away any evidence that could have been used to prove Chris's innocence and to prove that Emily did, in fact, do this to herself. But that evidence has been taken away now because she was cleaned and all of that's gone. So then the next witness that they bring in is this Dr. Carpagian guy who is an expert on teen schmooishmide. Y'all can tell me what you think in the comments. I think what Jordan is getting at with questioning this Dr. Carpagian guy. So basically this doctor says that Chris and Emily's personalities did this fusion thing where they lose their own personalities. And because of this schmooishmide pact, like form this new personality. And the only thing, I guess, the most important thing that matters in this new personality is the pact that they have together. Basically trying to paint this picture that Chris did not want to live without Emily. They were so connected, because they were like raised together from the time they were really young, and that their personalities had fused together, that they were so connected that one does not and cannot live without the other. That's what this doctor is saying. And so I think Jordan is using that to prove Chris's innocence, not want to live without Emily. Again, if you're new here or if you've just, forgotten, their whole defense is that this was a schmooishmide pact gone wrong and that Chris was in fact also going to off himself as well. But he didn't have time to do it before he then passed out and the cops showed up and, all this crazy shit started happening. This shitstorm happened. The prosecution thinks that Chris is the one who shot and killed Emily, and that's what they're trying to prove. And then we've got the defense over here, Jordan, trying to say that Chris is innocent because he was also going to do this to himself, but he just didn't get the chance to do it before Emily did it, so he shouldn't be held responsible for her death, all of that. I think that's why he brings in this doctor who's like trying to say basically that Chris lived, ate, and breathed Emily, and that he would not want to live without her around. He couldn't have murdered her. There's no possible way that he would have murdered her because he didn't want to live without her, so why the fuck would he kill her? That's my opinion as to why Jordan is, like, the point that Jordan is trying to make here, bringing in this doctor. So then Barry comes up. So as we know, months before Emily's death, she purchases this really expensive fancy watch for Chris. Prosecution is arguing that why would she have bought this fancy watch, this fancy present for her boyfriend Chris, if she was gonna kill herself? Why would she be planning this this gift for him, because she was like planning it months in advance and like hadn't given it to him yet. Why would she have this planned to give to him if she was going to kill herself? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And so then this doctor says that the gift is a dead giveaway. It would make sense that she would purchase this fancy, expensive gift because you're not worried about money if you're not going to be here. Like, you don't care really how much money you're spending. Something she was planning to leave behind for someone to make sure she was remembered. So that's what the doctor says. That's a dead giveaway that she was going to off herself because she wants to leave something behind for everybody to be remembered by. So that's how the defense is using this. We still don't know what the damn deal is with the watch. Like, I don't know if we ever will know why she did that. Prosecution is saying the watch doesn't make sense. Why would she kill herself if she was going to plan this fancy gift to give to her boyfriend? Why? And Barry's like, you built this profile of Emily, the dead girl, to analyze this case and to investigate all this shit. And yet you didn't interview Chris, her boyfriend, the one that she had this pact with. You didn't even interview the person that was the closest to her. You didn't ask him any information about her in order to build this profile of her. You didn't ask the person that was closest to her, that she had this pact with, that she spent the most time with. The only other person that knew about what she was going to do. And you didn't bother to ask him anything about her in order to build this profile of her. Kind of a good point. Somebody help me out here. Why would it help the prosecution? Oh, I know why they didn't. Because they didn't want Chris to incriminate himself. It just clicked in my head. What I'm thinking, y'all can let me know what you're thinking, but what I'm thinking is the reason that they probably did not interview Chris or ask him any questions about Emily in order to build this profile on Emily was because they didn't want him to incriminate himself. So they're asking him as little as possible because, again, as we've just learned, this profile of Emily and the one of Chris are being built and have been built by the defense, the Chris's side, right? So I think they didn't ask him anything about Emily in order to build her profile because they didn't want him to say something that would incriminate himself. So they're just asking as little as possible from him, which makes sense. Like, you know, if you've ever had an attorney, like, they don't really want to know the truth. They're trying to keep their client from being found guilty. So they're going to ask as little as possible so that they can build their case, right? So Barry here, the prosecuting Chris, is like, so you all didn't ask Chris a goddamn thing about his girlfriend that you built the profile on, and why is that? Basically, I think she's pointing out that, like, y'all did that on purpose. All right, so that's where we ended. This was reading 26 of The Pact by Jodi Picoult. I done lost the thing, the cover. What do you think? Who are your favorite characters? Who do you relate to? What do you think is about to happen? Put it in the comments and let me know. If you want to keep watching, I will link the next book club video up here somewhere for you, so you can keep watching. So you can click on that if you want to keep watching. I love you guys. I love that you enjoyed this as much as I do. Thank you so much for watching. Tap the like and subscribe buttons and have a wonderful day.
How y'all feel out there? I'm light years, call me eons. When the snare kick in, the beat is neon. Lights, yeah, I'm feeling magnificent. Care less what I'm up against.